So we're in week 4 of this series, and we're just starting chapter 2. So we're taking our time, right? I think I mentioned this earlier. You could probably read the book of Ruth just in like 10 minutes, but this story, while simple, has so much richness, so much depth. And so what we've been doing is we're just kind of taking a chunk at a time, and we're kind of progressing through the story, and we're using that as an opportunity to kind of sit and meditate on something, to really reflect on some aspect, some detail. And we're going to continue that today. I'm starting chapter 2, and we're going to be introducing our third and kind of final, you could say, main character in this story. So to catch anyone up, so far, our main two people that we're following are Naomi and her daughter-in-law, Ruth. Now, Naomi, because of a famine, moved to a foreign land. She lost her husband, she lost her 2 sons, and all she has left now is her daughter-in-law, Ruth, who refuses to leave her side. So you have this mother-in-law and this daughter-in-law, and they've returned to Naomi's homeland. And now we're going to meet our third primary character. His name is Boaz. So I want to start off by reading for us Ruth chapter 2, verses 1 through 7, and then we'll jump into what we're going to talk about today. So this, like I said, is the start of chapter 2, the first 7 verses. Now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him, in whose sight I shall find favor." And she said to her, "Go, my daughter." So she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the clan of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and he said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." And they answered, "The Lord bless you." Then Boaz said to this young man who was in charge of the reapers, "Whose young woman is this?" And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, "She is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, 'Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers.' So she came, and she has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest." All right, so this is the next chunk. We're introduced to this man named Boaz, right? This worthy man, and he has this field, and Ruth is going out to glean from his field. And we'll talk more about what that looks like next week. Next week, we're going to dive more into how this plays out and all of Boaz's generosity towards her. But just so you understand what's going on, God had instituted a law amongst his people that if you had a field, you would go through and you'd harvest, but if you missed any, so imagine you're not going to go super slow, so you're whacking your seed, you're harvesting, some of it you're going to miss, some's going to fall to the ground. God instituted a law where you leave the leftovers, so that way the poor, the widows, the orphans, and the sojourners could come through and have food to eat. So it was a law to protect the poor and needy, so there would always be some provision for them. So God had instituted this law. Ruth supposedly was told by Naomi this is how things work. So given that Ruth and Naomi are widows, and Ruth is a sojourner, right? Go into a field, go find food. We'll dive more into that next week. What I want to reflect on today is Boaz, and specifically how we're introduced to him. So this is the first thing we're told about Boaz, other than he's a relative, is we have this statement that he is a worthy man. Okay, that Boaz is a worthy man. Depending if you were to look at a different Bible translation, it might say a man of standing. Okay, it might say a mighty man. This is a word that sometimes is associated with warriors or soldiers, but in this case, it seems to be his relation to his community. So it's almost like he's a mighty man in the civil sense, right? Like a soldier when it comes to how he treats others in his community. It's an interesting way to capture him. But in our translation here, we have this word, makes sense. He's a worthy man, right? A man of standing. So what I want to do today is I want to look at Boaz and how we're introduced to him. And I want to reflect on what it looks like in God's sense to be a worthy person, right? To be a worthy man or a worthy woman. What does that look like for our lives? And we're going to use Boaz as kind of our launching point for that. So here's what I want to look at today. I want to look at 3 contrasts between what it looks like to be worthy in the godly sense and the ways of this world. So what does it look like to live worthily in God's sense compared to what comes more naturally in our sinful nature? Then I want to reflect on how Jesus fits into all of this, and then I want to talk about how we can put this into practice. So 3 contrasts, then Jesus, then how we can do it. Sound good? All right, so to start off, if we think about Boaz as a worthy man, the second and third things are going to flow from the first. So the first thing that I want to highlight for us is this interaction he has with his employees. So Boaz clearly is a man of standing. He owns fields. He has employees. But when he greets his employees, he does something really interesting because he doesn't just say like, how's progress today, right? He starts off by having this little interaction with them. We're told, and Boaz said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." And then they answered, "The Lord bless you." It's kind of this nice call and response. Now, what's beautiful about this is a couple things. First off, right, so it's cool to see the way that he treats his employees, right? They work for him, but he's greeting them kindly. That's nice. Second off, though, he's greeting them in a way that invokes the Lord, right? So Boaz is not just using some stock greeting, right? This is not like an agnostic saying, "God bless you," because that's just what we say. But when he says the Lord, he's actually invoking God's given name. So when you read your English Bible, right, you'll see throughout the Old Testament places where it'll say the Lord. And what that is doing is that is a stand-in for God's personal revealed name. So when God first reveals his name to Moses in the burning bush, he says, "This is my name," and it basically equates to YHWH. This is what you'll often hear people say, Yahweh. That's our best guess at how that is pronounced, Yahweh. So that is what Boaz is saying. So when Boaz is talking here, he's actually saying this. He comes up to his employees and he says, "Yahweh be with you." And they answer, "Yahweh bless you." So Boaz, we're seeing right away, is actually calling upon not just generic "God help me," but he's actually saying, "Yahweh be with you," right? This would be like somebody seeing you and saying, "Hey, greetings in the name of Jesus," right? Calling upon a specific name. Now, this is cool for a couple reasons. First off, it's cool to see that he would, just in a normal interaction with his employees, say, "Hey, Yahweh be with you." But secondly, this was pointed out in our life group. Somebody brought up last week. This is the period of the Judges. And the period of the Judges it's like when a rebellious kid moves out of his parents' house for the first time and like goes wild. Like the period of the Judges is Yahweh has brought his people to a promised land. He's saved them from slavery. He's forgiven them. He's redeemed them. He's brought them to a promised land. And then they just cut loose. And it gets ugly fast. And the people turn from Yahweh and they start worshiping Baal. And they start worshiping Asherah. And they start worshiping Molech. And they start worshiping all these hosts of God. And as a result of that, they start committing all of these atrocities. They're doing all sorts of terrible things. If you want to read about it, check out the book of Judges. It gets ugly fast. I'll just say that. So what we see, though, is in a period where people are doing what is defined in the book of Judges. This is the key feature of the time of the Judges, is that everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. I do right and wrong based on what I think. What's good, bad, what's right, wrong, what's good, evil, according to me. We see Boaz, though, have a different posture. He's not just going after whatever God he wants. He's not just going after whatever he thinks is right. He's invoking Yahweh. So central to this idea of living as a worthy man or a worthy woman, we see the difference between doing according to Yahweh versus doing according to my way. The difference between Yahweh, my way. That's borderline youth pastor Instagram stuff right there, but it drives the point home. So this is key, right? So the hard part is, as humans, our disposition is to do things how we want to do them, right? Right? As a kid, right? You're like, no, but I want to blank, right? Have you ever tried to reason with a child? You're like, hey, you have to do this, but I want to do that. It's like, I know, but you have to do this, but I want to do that, right? That's how we're born into that. You were like that as a kid. I was like that as a kid. And truth be told, it's how we are most of our life. When push comes to shove, it's like, well, I want this, or I don't want to do that. That is our default. And the challenge that God calls us to is to live not according to my way, not just according to what I determine is right and wrong, but according to God's way, God's good way, the way of the Lord, the way of Jesus, whatever you want to fill in there, right? That God's way is a way that is good and right, and he will make your paths straight, right? It'll be blessed, it'll be good. And so, as we think about our lives, and we think about wanting to live a worthy life, it's taking everything we have and saying, all right, I'm not just going to lay out what do I want from my life. what do I want to do with this situation? What do I want out of this relationship or this career or this whatever? But asking, what does the Lord want from me? What's the good way that he has laid out for me? Now, for each of these contrasts, I'm going to make one clarification. So I want to make the clarification for this one now. When we talk about doing things according to the Lord's way and not just our own way, I'm not saying that every minuscule decision you have to make requires like a little moment of silence with a prayer. Like if you go to Chipotle after this, like and they're like, do you want steak or chicken? Please, you don't have to be like, just wait 1 second. Dear Lord, your way is better than mine. All right, steak it is. Thank you very much. Right? The beautiful thing is that in Christ we have freedom. So this is true of careers, right? What job do I have? Sometimes we put so much pressure that God has laid out every like little decision and every step that I have to like stop and I have to figure out and everything else is going to be wrong. That's not the case. Like if you or a loved one is trying to figure out what to do with your life career-wise, like you think about what gifts I have, how I can use them, how can I provide for my household, and then there's probably going to be several options. And then you pick one, right? And there's freedom in that. And it's never wrong. If you have a decision and you're having trouble, prayer is always a good thing, right? Seeking the Lord's favor is good. But we're talking about big picture here. That at the end of the day, how I live, how I interact, how I overall use my life is according to the Lord's way and not my way. Okay? So that's our first contrast. To live this worthy life is doing things according to Yahweh and not just doing things according to my way. Leads us to our second one. So you think about Boaz here, and Boaz, right, so he clearly has some possessions, he has fields, he has employees, but we see not only in how he treats his employees, but in how he treats Ruth, we see that he uses them to give. We're going to dive more into this next week, but we see this spirit of generosity, where what he has is not used for his own sake, but for the sake of others. And so the second key feature of living this worthy life is living to give instead of living to gain. Living to give instead of living to gain. Again, you think about us as kids, right? Like the first thing you knew how to do is cry when you're hungry, when you're tired, or when you need your diaper changed, right? Our default is, I need something, give it to me, right? Give me food, give me a nap, give me a new diaper, right? And again, as we grow up, this is how our default position, right? You think about we ask questions like, what do you want from your life? And we think about what kind of house I want, what kind of experiences do I want? I want to travel here, here, and here. I want to have this, this, and this. I want this kind of car. I want this kind of family. And we typically think in terms of what I want to gain in life, what I want to accumulate for myself, okay? But what God calls us to, rather than just thinking in terms of what living to gain, is this posture of I'm living to give. I'm looking at my life as a vessel for which God can give through me. That God cares about every person in this world, and he cares about every person I interact with, and he's actually chosen me to be a vessel, an instrument to give to them. That could be financial, right? Giving to somebody in need. It could be time. It could be giving somebody my time and attention, right? Often think about our relationships and how often I think of, I need somebody in my life who will listen to me when I'm having problems. How often do I think, I need to be somebody in other people's lives who will listen to them when they have problems, right? Not just gaining, but giving, right? Because, again, the problem is our default is to gain, but we have a God who in and of himself is fully sufficient. He's all things, and he just gives. He gives to us, he gives to the world, and he's called us to do the same. So clarification on this point, does that mean it's wrong to gain anything? Clearly not, right? Boaz clearly had possessions, he had a field, he had employees, right? If somebody wants to give you a gift, somebody wants to pay you for doing a job, this is not to say, nope, I can't do it, I only give, I don't take, right? But rather, fundamentally, what is motivating my life? Am I motivated by giving of myself, giving of my gifts, giving of my time and resources, or am I motivated by gaining? And part of the challenge is that, again, our default is we want to gain, and we're really good at justifying it, right? Oh, I need more money because I need to provide for my family, which leads to the question, how much does my family really need, right? I need all of these things at work. I need all of these accolades or promotions so I can go give and be more generous in other ways. Maybe. And if those things come, yeah, use them to give, but But sometimes we use the back end of what we're going to do with everything as a justification for gaining. So making sure that we have the priorities right. I'm here to give, and if God entrusts me with a salary increase, praise be to God. How can I use it to give? God entrusts me with some time freed up in my life. Praise be to God. How can I use that time and give it in service towards others? Okay? It's not wrong to gain, but we're not living to gain. We're living to give. Which leads us to our final one. And again, these ones just flow out of the first one. If we're doing things the Lord's way, we're going to live to give. And then finally, as we reflect on Boaz and Ruth. So Boaz sees Ruth, and he's like, who's that woman? The first detail he's told about her is that she's a Moabite. I've hit it home a couple times. I encourage you to go check out past sermons, but I'll just say this. Moabites, not a good reputation. Israelites were not fond of them. So he very quickly could have judged based on her reputation and appearance as a Moabite, as a foreigner, as one of those people. But instead what we'll see is Boaz sees Ruth based on her actions and what she has done for her mother-in-law Naomi. So we see this final quality of the difference between being focused on substance versus focused on appearance. Focused on substance versus focused on appearance. Once again, we're really good at focusing on appearance. You think about the people who we as a world hold up high, right? Like, I have yet to see a magazine say, this is the world's most compassionate man this year. I've seen a lot of sexiest man, right? I see a lot of products that say, hey, this will make you look younger and more beautiful. This will make you look more powerful, more competent. I see a lot fewer advertisements when I'm watching the Super Bowl that say, here's how you can be more merciful in your life. Here's how you can be gentler with people. See, our default is, and sometimes it's all we have to go off of, right? We look at appearance, that's what we have. And it can be physical appearance, like beauty. It can be the appearance of money or status. I remember I was at a concert one time, and I was like towards the front, and the lead singer came out on one of those stages that like shoots out into the audience, and he walked by, and I like jumped up and like brushed his pant leg, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I look back, and I'm like, what? Like, why? Like, I know nothing about this guy. Like, is he a good dude? I don't know, but like, he's on a stage, he must be important, and I brushed his pant leg. Oh my goodness. Like, it's ridiculous when you say it, and yet we succumb to it all the time. Like, we look at somebody, and somebody is a talented actor, and we're like, great, what's your take on the meaning of life? Why? Right? But those are the people we attribute so much status to and so much power, and we look to them. But one of the things that cuts through all of this, I think God has put into us a sense of what really matters. Sometime listen to what gets said at a funeral. Whoever gets up there and says, they were the best person I ever knew because of their jean size. Oh man, let me tell you, he was the best person I ever knew because he had so much money. Right? No, right? We talk about the ways that they love, the ways that they care, the time and the compassion and the mercy and the forgiveness, right? Their displays of faith, right? The substance. God knows that we do this. In the next book of the Bible, right after Ruth, comes the book of Samuel, and there's a moment where God has told Samuel, hey, I need a new king. I've picked somebody out for you, okay? There's a man named Jesse. It's one of his sons. So Samuel goes, he finds Jesse, and he says, hey, nice to meet you. Do you have any sons around? Jesse's like, yeah, I'll go get them. First son comes out. His name's Eliab. He's the oldest. And Samuel looks at Eliab, and he sees this man who's like tall, dark, and handsome. And he's like, whew, looks like a king to me. This must be the one. And the Lord tells Samuel, says, no. Now, I haven't picked him. You see, the Lord doesn't judge as man judges because man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. The Lord's not bogged down by the outward appearance of things. He looks at the substance. He looks at the heart. And so often we spend so much time, whether it's looking at other people's appearances, whether it's focused on our own appearance, and not enough time focused on the substance. And we do this too, right? So we talked about beauty. We talked about power. We can do this in terms of holiness, right? This is what Jesus is dealing with. You have a whole lot of people who are saying, look at me. Look how holy I am. I can do this really long, elegant prayer, and I can quote all the scriptures like nobody's business. And they're trying to show everybody how righteous they are. It's just another form of appearance, right? Jesus cuts through all of that. So we have these kind of three things that Boaz in this short little passage highlights for us. We have this idea of doing things according to Yahweh instead of my way. We have living to give instead of living to gain. And we have being focused on the substance instead of focused on the appearance. I want to reflect on Jesus, because then you might ask, like, how does Jesus fit into all this? Well, hopefully it's obvious that Jesus is the worthiest man who's ever lived. Like, if there's one person who's ever walked this earth who should deem the term worthy, it should be Jesus. And you think back on these three things. How did Jesus do things? So Jesus was faced with all sorts of temptations. Temptations for power, for comfort, whatever. He was faced with all sorts of temptations to abandon his mission. And yet when push came to shove on his final night on earth before he died, he's praying to his Father. And he says, Lord, if it is possible, let this cup pass. Let the suffering and death that I'm going to endure go away from me. Don't make me do it. But nevertheless, not my will be done, but your will be done. Not my way. At the end of the day, Lord, your way be done. And he set aside anything else, any other temptation that he might have had, and he was so wholly attuned to God's way, God's will, even to the point of suffering and death for you. Think about Jesus. You read through the Gospels, what did Jesus gain, right? So he gives up his glory to come down to earth, and then, can you imagine that? You're the eternal Son of God. You made everybody who's ever, been born. And then you're like, all right, I'm going to set aside all of my glory and power and majesty so I can become a baby who needs his diapers changed. That's the humility God has. That's how much he gives. And then throughout his life, he gives up a chance for a comfortable life at home. He says at one point, the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. I have no place, right? Throughout this ministry, he continues to give. He gives his time. He gives his energy. He gives his ministry. At points, he says, I'm exhausted. I need to go out and rest. And then the crowds, they follow him out there, and he goes, all right, fine. I'll give. I'll heal. I'll teach, right? I'll get my rest later. Eventually, he gives all things. At the Last Supper, he gives his body and his blood to his disciples. He eventually gives everything he has. He gives his last breath on a cross for us to make us righteous. He didn't do anything to gain. He did everything solely to give. And then you think about substance and appearance, and again, Jesus is in a time when people are obsessed with appearance and looking holy and righteous, and if Jesus was focused on appearance, he would not have talked to just about anybody he talked to. Guy with leprosy, gross, unclean, not talking to you. He talks to a woman, and everyone says, Jesus, do you know what she does at night? Jesus says, I know. He looks at all of these people who by all appearances are sinful, unholy, and unfit for a time with the Son of God. And he sees through all the appearances and he sees to the heart. And does he see a heart that's pure and good and holy? No. But he sees hearts that are repentant. He sees hearts that are crying out for forgiveness and hearts that are seeking Jesus because they know that he can offer them hope and life that the rest of the world can't. And he sees those Pharisees who by all appearances are holy and righteous and godly, and he sees callousness and cold-heartedness. Jesus himself, you think about his appearance, right? I have yet to find the Bible verse about Jesus' jawline. If you find it, show it to me. Not focused on appearance, but his heart was pure. His heart was holy and he was good. So Jesus, all of these things wrapped up, he is the one that in Revelation that we're going to be singing one day, worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, of all people who is worthy. Jesus is worthy because he followed his Father's way. He gave everything he had, even his own life on a cross. And he saw not on the appearances, but the heart. And because of that, Jesus is the one true worthy man who has ever lived. And he did all of that. He suffered, he came, he died, he was buried, he rose, so that you might be worthy too. Because the truth is, even following Jesus, how often am I perfect at following the Lord's way? How often do I find myself going, no, but this is what I want to do? How often do I give instead of going, oh man, I kind of would like that. That would be kind of nice. And I too often, right, I judge based off appearances, and I spend too much time trying to get this stupid rooster tail that I have in the back of my head to lay down flat. Right? Jesus sees through all of that, and he sees us, and when we come and we repent, and we ask for forgiveness, and when we are baptized into his people, he takes his worthiness and he stamps it on us and says, you are now worthy. Apart from anything you've done, apart from any striving, any achieving, in Jesus, you are worthy. Nothing less, nothing more. Worthy. That's who you are. Jesus has given that freely because he's worthy. In him, you are worthy. So then the question is, what do we do with this? Well, as the Apostle Paul says, right? He says to live in a manner worthy of that calling. If you're worthy in Jesus, you are worthy. Apart from anything you've done, believing in him, repenting, asking for forgiveness, asking for his grace, being baptized into him, worthy. Then the thing is, let's live a life that shows it. Gosh, I'm worthy. Oh, cool. Let's go live like it. Let's go show people this worthy life that God has given us. Let's be a witness to this. So as we think through these three components today, I invite you to maybe hone in on one that maybe you could think about this week and maybe take some action on, right? So thinking about, here I got one question for each. If you think about doing things according to Yahweh or the Lord's way instead of my way, maybe for you the question you can ask today is there something in my life that I'm doing my way instead of the Lord's way? Is there something in my life that I've been insisted upon doing in my way, even though I know the Lord's way is different, right? Think about relationships. You think about God has designed marriage in a specific way, that there's certain things that once you've made the commitment of marriage, you join bodies, you join homes, you join finances, you join lives. There's a commitment there. Have I been faithful to that? Am I doing that? Or do I need to make some sort of changes? Am I doing it my own way? Think about business practices. Maybe I'm sitting there at work and there's something that either I'm doing or my company's doing, and I know this is taking advantage of people, whether employees or customers. Something's shady, but it's what everyone's doing, right? Everyone's just kind of going along with it. Maybe I'm not doing it the Lord's way, where I'm treating people justly and fairly. Maybe I'm doing it my way, okay? Think about giving versus gaining. Maybe for you can ask today, what step can I take to shift from living to gain to living to give? Maybe this week I'm going to just start small. I'm going to say this week, I'm going to give a little bit of my money to somebody in need. I'm going to find some organization, some person in my life who's struggling, and instead of just thinking about gaining, I'm going to step out and I'm going to give. Maybe it's time. Maybe when I have that free hour on Thursday nights, I'm off work and I'm tired, instead of just thinking of like, okay, I need to unwind and watch some Netflix and recharge a little bit, maybe I'm just going to give 30 minutes to my grandfather, who I know doesn't have a lot of people talking to him right now, and could use somebody to check in on him. And I'm going to give my time in service and love. Maybe you have a friend who right now is on hard times, and I'm going to give my couch up for a season. It's like, God gave me this house. I got some room. Do you need a place to stay? Okay, so maybe for you it's gaining to giving. Maybe it's appearance to substance. How can I shift my focus from appearance to substance and thinking about the heart? So you can think about this a couple ways. Maybe whether it's in my neighborhood or some sort of club I'm in or workplace or family, like I gravitate towards the people who appear powerful or the people who appear put together, the people who appear beautiful. And I've been overlooking those people who seem less than. And this week I'm gonna make an effort to get to know and talk to those people and get to know who they are. Maybe it's my own appearance. I think about this, like imagine if however long we spend on our own appearance, whether it's physical appearance, whether it's on thinking through how I present myself online or how I present myself to the world. If I spend as much time focusing on my heart as I do focusing in the mirror, what would happen? If I'm going to spend 30 minutes getting my appearance ready for everybody, what if I spent 30 minutes every day praying that God would help soften my heart, make me a more patient, compassionate, merciful person, that he would help me be more forgiving, more Christ-like, right? So for you, I just encourage you just to pick one of these. If you try and do them all, it's going to be too much. Pick one of these questions for you and think about that. What can I do this week? What can I do to take a step? Knowing that I'm not going to do this, so God will say, great, you did what Pastor PJ said, you're worthy now. You're already worthy in Jesus. Repenting, believing in him, you are worthy. And by God's grace, may we live a life that shows the worthiness that Jesus has given us. We do this all according to his holy and most precious and worthy name. Amen.